Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Begin tonight with the escalating standoff, of course, between Trump and Congress over Trump's stonewalling of congressional investigations. The chairman of the Oversight Committee now saying jail time could be on the table for witnesses who ignore subpoenas.
There is no tool in our toolbox that we should not explore. We will look at all those tools from a very practical standpoint. It may be that we want to just deal with fines. I don't know, but it's either fines and or prison.
Fines or prison. That is the threat as Democrats are in the middle of a huge power struggle with Trump Attorney General Bill Barr, who's threatening to bail on their hearing Thursday after Democrats, of course, said they want him to face additional questions from committee staffers. Judiciary Chair Jerry Nadler said they're preparing a subpoena if Barr does not show. Now Chairman Cummings raising the stakes and making it very clear Democrats are in uncharted territory. Watch this.
This is new for us. This is new. This situation where we can't get documents. And by the way, can I get one single White House witness? Come on now.
With me, Mara Gang, editorial board member for the New York Times, and Richard Stengel, who was Undersecretary of State in the Obama administration and the former managing editor of Time magazine. Richard, I'll start with you on this one. Fines or jail? Neither of those are very good prospects, to say the least, for the Attorney General. Possibly, you're talking about the Attorney General of the United States here. Possibly fines or jail if he does not show up for this Thursday testimony. Is that the only way the Democrats can go about this?
There are other ways, but I would say let's bring it on. This is a conflict between the Article 1 branch, which is Congress, and the Article 2 branch, the executive. This is how our system is supposed to work. There's supposed to be conflict between them, and I think the fact that Congress is threatening these kinds of remedies, these are remedies that are well within its power. Again, the executive can resist, and ultimately the judicial system will decide. But I think this is exactly how our system of checks and balances is supposed to work, and we're seeing it play out in front of us.
I mean, we're seeing, obviously, Bill Barr threaten not to show up on Thursday. We're hearing the Trump administration obviously defying so many subpoenas when it comes to financial records. We're going to be talking about that later on in the show. So he's not just talking about Bill Barr here. He is talking about all of these stops along the way that the Trump administration has made in order to keep Congress from pursuing the investigation that they are pursuing, Mara.
I mean, that's right. First of all, if the House isn't going to pursue impeachment proceedings, then this is exactly what they should be doing. The only unfortunate part here is that there aren't more Republicans joining in them, because this really isn't a partisan matter. This is about Congress doing its job, which is to hold, just checks and balances, and to hold this White House in particular accountable. That's not a partisan effort. Mm-hmm. It's just a shame that Republicans have become a party that are unwilling to perform their central obligation in government as public servants.
Richard Reich, former Clinton cabinet secretary, calling for Congress to be ready to arrest Bill Barr. He's going so far as to say, get ready to arrest, again, the Attorney General for not showing up possibly on Thursday morning. He's already wrote in Newsweek about the obstruction today. He said, no questioning a former White House security director about issuances of security clearances, no questioning anybody about presidential tax returns. Such a blanket edict fits a dictator of a banana republic, not the president of a constitutional republic founded on separation of powers. He is calling for the possible arrest of the Attorney General. That is where we are at right now.
I think that's a little extreme. And again, it is separation of powers, and there's all different kinds of things that you can do. I actually thought that Joe Biden moved the ball a little bit further than anybody today by saying that, in fact, by resisting cooperating with a legitimate investigation by an oversight branch of Congress, that is a potentially impeachable offense in and of itself, apart from everything in the Barr investigation, which I think is a really interesting idea.
Do you think Democrats, Mara, are going to follow through on all of these threats that they've made so far?
Oh, I think there's a lot of ground to cover between that point and where we are now. And I think that the Democrats are trying to go about this, it seems, methodically and logically. And this is a really good place to start. I mean, these are committees that have been around for many years. They didn't, exist because of the White House's inappropriate behavior. So they are just doing business as usual, which is the exact right way to proceed. I mean, it's an extraordinary situation, but at this point, the House is using, as you said, the exact means within its power, and that's they're doing the job.
I want to go back to the point that you made about Joe Biden, because on the campaign trail, we have not necessarily heard such strong language coming from people that have declared they're running for president of the United States so far, except Joe Biden. We've heard, obviously, from Elizabeth Warren that she was calling for impeachment after the Muller report came out. What do you make of it?
I think it's a very smart point, and I think it's another bite out of the apple for Congress. I mean, if you're trying to obstruct a legitimate investigation by one branch of Congress, that is a potentially impeachable offense. And by the way, as it's been said 1,000 times, high crimes and misdemeanors is whatever Congress says it is. And Congress can decide that if President Trump is not cooperating with an investigation, that's a high crime and misdemeanor.
It is Wednesday, the 1st of May of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Well, folks, William Barr has been in front of the Senate, and I hate to admit this, but I couldn't watch because I'm preparing a show. That's how it works, darn it. Followed a little bit on Twitter because that's where you can get most of the information in real time. But looks like the cover-up continues. I'm very curious about when Kamala Harris will question, and I was thinking people should just give their time to Kamala and let her do her prosecutor work. Everybody says she's a prosecutor. Well, let her prosecute. And I don't think it would go well for Barr, and it may even cause Lindsey Graham to tell everybody to kiss his ass. Well, we would if he would get his head out of the way. Lindsey. And we still don't know if Barr is going to show up to the House. At the top there, that was Elijah Cummings pretty much laying down the law, saying you don't acknowledge this subpoena. You try to stonewall congressional oversight, well, maybe you're going to have to go to jail. You're going to get some jail time. And remember, as it was summed up at the end, high crimes and misdemeanors is what Congress says that it is. Oh, yeah. And, another part, and I haven't seen the total because it's a running total, by about 5 a.m. on the East Coast, Trump had already tweeted 70 times. He's on a rage, and I wonder why. Because I don't think he was expecting Mueller's team to drop that memo. that letter to the DOJ. And whoever did that is an American hero, a true blue, red-blooded American hero, by the way. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. It certainly moves the investigation down the road to its hopefully final summation, and the result of which will be handcuffs and frog marches to, I don't know, a prison, a jail, a brig, I don't care, a gated community in which they cannot leave. That would be just fine. Speaking of which, Julian Assange was sentenced to 50 weeks for jumping bail in Britain. No word on extradition yet to the United States, but I'm sure that's in the offing. It may be, though, that Theresa May and the rest of the Brits don't really care for Donny. And even though we could use Julian Assange for a few inquiries, there may be a gumming up of the works in which that extradition may not be fulfilled. Even though, I got to say, everybody in those levels of power probably would consider it to be good. But Donnie has just stepped on so many toes. Some people around the world just don't want to get their toes stepped on anymore. They just don't. Well, let's take a look at what else is on the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The GOP is trying to make it a crime to register voters in at least 3 states. And they happen to be states that the Democratic Party was able to win vast numbers in state, congressional, U.S., city, even dog catcher. And that has the Republicans mad. And since they're really fascists at heart, of course they're going to try to keep people from voting. That's what they do. Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale raked in thousands of dollars from foreign officials, and the campaign is just fine with it. Because grifters are grifters, mobsters are mobsters, but they're certainly not leaders of a great nation. And Trump ally Erik Prince faces a criminal referral for lying to Congress. Well, I guess he didn't lie to Mueller then, did he? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Fontana, California Police Department apologized for calling Representative Rashida Tlaib un-American and a disgrace on social media. They had to apologize. And jailed Russian agent Maria Butina slammed her absurd conviction in a jailhouse phone interview with Russian media. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. So do engage, please do. And if you would also engage with our contribute link at the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, we would be forever grateful if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. You know, we've been on the air for 8 years of continuous broadcasting resistance. That's right. We are resisting as the founders originally intended, and in large part because of your generosity. Yes, you are our biggest contributor, because how we power this powerhouse of resistance comes out of our own wallets and you. So thank you so much for that generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then I try to get those links out on social media. I really do try. Sometimes it's a little bit into the show, but that's okay. We have that clip at the top. Yes, we do. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Okay, let's take a look at this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays was yesterday, and Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is today. And then tomorrow, it'll be Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A daily special for every special day. And every day of the week is special, at least here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Emily Singer of Share Blue Media brings us this first offering here. The 2018 midterms brought a surge of new voters to the polls, many of them younger, and minority voters who break heavily toward Democrats. Yet, rather than applaud the new trend of increased civic engagement, 3 GOP-held state legislators have instead responded with new legislation making it harder to register voters, and even threatening voters and voter registration groups with fines and criminal penalties if they turn in, quote, deficient, end quote, registration forms, or otherwise fail to follow the much stricter new rules. You didn't stand on one leg for 3 seconds. It was 2.8. Jail for you. Isn't that weird? How many people, like this 26-year-old bus driver who raped a 14-year-old girl? No jail time. His only fine was paying his court fees. Not hers, his. Fill out your registration form. Don't stand on one leg for that 0.2 of a second, and it's jail for you. Voting rights experts say this is an insidious new trend intended to chill voter registration and make it harder for people to access the ballot box. Well, you know, I'm old enough to remember Acorn, a voter registration group, who was wrongly maligned by James O'Keefe, who was just the Jacob Wool of his time. But it caused such an uproar that Acorn had to be disbanded, especially since it was managed by black people. It really seems to be a direct response to a surge in voter registrations from the African American community and deep engagement from black civic organizations ahead of the previous election. Sunila Chilakuri, a senior research and policy associate at the State Innovation Exchange, said in an interview, Tennessee's GOP-held legislature passed its voter registration measure this last Monday, sending the bill to the Republican governor's desk for signature. And of course he is. He's going to sign it. The bill creates all sorts of new rules targeting groups that register people to vote. It forces voter registration groups to register with state election officials, imposes a 10-day deadline to turn in registration forms collected from registration drives, bans groups from paying organizers by the number of registration forms they successfully solicit, and subjects any organizers who intentionally or knowingly violate those rules to a year in prison, a $2,500 fine, or both. Now in Georgia, Republicans can stuff the ballot box, fill out absentee ballots for people, any number of things, and nothing will be done. But as soon as a Democrat actually wins fair and square, they're going to keep people from registering to vote. Democrats say that these new attacks on voting rights show the need to vote Republicans out of office at the state legislative level to prevent such malicious bills from becoming law. And yeah, I think the Dean 50-state strategy attended to that. What happened? After the Democrats' massive wins, Republicans are doing everything they can to rig the system before next year's elections, Jessica Post, executive director of the DLCC, said in a statement to Share Blue. Republicans in Washington have received attention for gutting the Voting Rights Act, but often the state legislatures go unnoticed as they make it harder to vote. The Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee is dedicated to flipping state chambers blue, she said, so we can stop these unconstitutional attacks and expand voting rights. Now, lawmakers should be encouraging people to participate in democracy, not punishing them for it. At the end of the day, civic engagement should not be criminalized in any way. I meant to mention at the top, my brother has flown out to Atlanta to finish up taping for his show, and then he comes back, and his show is up for an Emmy, so there'll be, I believe it's in Santa Monica. That's usually where the Emmys are held, unless they moved it to Century City. Maybe they moved it to Century City, but regardless, he goes back to L.A. for the Emmys, and then he makes it back home, but we get to take care of his English Bulldog Gunner, who we really love. He's such a great guy. I'm going to make a point of posting some photos of him because he's a great-looking dog, brindle-colored, kind of a puppy, too. And he's got some thickness to him, and you got to be careful. God, I love him. But so he's a treat. And every now and then, he likes to push my door open, and English boxers like to snort and snore and pretty much make noises. So if that happens, I apologize. I'll try to hustle him out so it doesn't interfere with the show too much. All right. Our next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Now, don't think anything untoward. It's just an elegant egg dish with a wonderful velvety hollandaise sauce. Truly. Okay. The great Oliver Willis brings us this offering. And, of course, he's from Share Blue Media as well. Trump's campaign manager, Brad Parscale, recently took thousands of dollars in payments from foreign officials. Parscale made his money while laying the groundwork for Trump's 2020 re-election campaign. Now, what's weird is that he apparently, they're saying he went there as a private citizen, not as a member of the campaign, but he gave a campaign speech and he's asking for money. I thought that was illegal. What do I know? The Washington Post reports that Parscale was in Romania in March and delivered a paid speech to a room full of Romanian politicians and policy elites. Did you know they speak really good Italian in Romania? Romania. Of course they'd speak Italian. It's a little jarring sometimes, too. You don't expect it. While Parscale would not reveal the precise amount of his payment, the company that represents him lists his speaking fee as between $15,000 and $25,000. Wow. Parscale admitted to the Post that he has given several of these speeches for foreign payments over the last few years with the full knowledge and the full permission of the campaign. I've never heard of anything like this before, Republican campaign strategist John Weaver told the Post. Really? Really now? What about Newt? Although that was about books. Okay, sure. There are too many opportunities where there could be potential conflicts between a presidential campaign and the policies that the candidate could espouse and potential income. It is a conflict of interest zone that you just never enter into. Mobsters don't think like that, John. They just don't. Weaver was a key figure in campaigns for Republican presidential candidates like George H.W. Bush, John McCain, John Huntsman, and John Kasich. That's a lot of Johns. What does it mean about you, John? It appears the Trump political organization has learned nothing from 2016 about the dangers of senior campaign officials' entanglement with foreign money. Trevor Potter of the Campaign Legal Center told the Post. Trump has refused to cut off his own financial entanglement with foreign entities because he's God. Everybody knows that. I mean, just ask his friends. You know, the ones that cheer him madly whenever he says, lock her up. The Trump campaign's entanglement with foreign governments, particularly Russian operatives, has been a major issue over the last few years. Really? Is that why it was a primary subject of Mueller's investigation? The Trump campaign is shrugging off such concerns. Parscale claimed questions about his foreign payments are just another effort by the biased fake news media to systematically target another person in President Trump's orbit. Now, of course, we don't use the P word when assigning Trump to that elevation. The Netroots Radio style manual actually forbids it. But in a direct quote from another mobster like Parscale, we have to include it. And, of course, whenever anybody in this orbit invokes the term fake news, it's just news that they don't agree with. It's not fake. It's actually true. The Trump re-election campaign is also reportedly working with former operatives from Cambridge Analytica, the data harvesting firm that is implicated in several scandals surrounding the 2016 election and the Brexit vote in the UK. But it's rare for Trump or any members of his team, whether in the White House or on the campaign, to try to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. So for Parscale, the only issue with profiting from deals with foreign officials is that why is anyone asking questions about it in the first place? Singer of Share Blue Media again brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Trump ally and billionaire military contractor Erik Prince. Military contractor, just so you know, is just a nice way of saying this guy is a mercenary and a gun runner. Well, he could be the latest member of Trump's circle to be swallowed up by the Russia investigation. That's because House Intel Committee Chairman Adam Schiff said his committee plans to make a criminal referral to the DOJ to investigate Prince's possible lies to Congress. Possible? They're all on tape, Adam. You know that. But he has to go through the protocol, and good for him. That's because the lies revolve around a meeting in the secluded Seychelles Islands that Prince had with a Russian businessman with ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The House Intel Committee interviewed Prince in November of 2017 about the Seychelles meeting, which Prince portrayed as an unplanned meetup, had a couple of beers in an Islamic country where they don't allow you to have beer, but we can because we're mercenaries and gun runners. We bring our own supply. However, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report painted an entirely different picture of the meeting. The two men discussed U.S.-Russia relations days before Trump was sworn in, and while the Russians were seeking to set up a back-channel line of communication to the Trump administration. You know, the ones that that would go around our own intel people? Who does that? A Russian operative in the Oval Office? Is that who does that? Schiff, who now has control of the House Intel Committee's Russia investigation, says that the Mueller report shows Prince was not truthful in his interview with his committee, and thus the DOJ should investigate Prince for lying to Congress. Ultimately, yet another member of Trump's inner circle could be in big trouble for lying under oath about shady contacts with the Russians. All right, let's get to our break. And when we come back from that break, you know we're going to go through weather from around the world. And we're going to finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to Netroots
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, plowing ahead. With the new movie Diane, older moviegoers get a gem and an outlier from Hollywood's usual demographic focus. The movie is the first narrative directorial project from writer-comedian Kent Jones, formerly of The Rachel Maddow and Daily Shows, and is a deep character study with the lead played by veteran Mary Kay Place. Diane lives alone in the Berkshires and shares a rich community life. All, however, is not perfect, as we soon learn. She has a son with drug problems, a dying cousin, and one big secret. But she's anchored by community work, especially helping in a kitchen for the poor. We get to know the stoic Diane character in bits of conversations at dinners, in hospital rooms, and in a bar during a curious retrospective journey with a fabulous soundtrack. The big reveal sort of slides in at just about the right time for you to put it in perspective. Between substantive scenes almost like chapter demarcations are long first-person shots of her driving through the rural wooded landscape, often at night and almost always uphill. Diane's drug addict son, played by Jake Lacey, alternates between substance abuse and Jesus, and a dinner scene where Lacey's character attempts to save Diane's soul is as uncomfortable as it is telling. Along with Place and Lacey, not enough can be said about the cast of mature character actors who form the community with whom Diane interacts. And then there's product placement, specifically books by Emily Dickinson, which are at Diane's bedside and on her coffee table as she addresses her diary. Dickinson understood this movie's story 150 years ago, writing, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tunes without words and never stops at all." This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. On July 20th, 1969, humankind finally set foot on the surface of the moon. 50 years later, a big mystery remains: how the heck the moon got there in the first place. For decades, the thinking on that has been that 4.5 billion years ago, a Mars-sized protoplanet smashed into the Earth. When the dust settled, our moon remained, forged from the debris of Earth and that other object. The problem is, as scientists have taken more and more precise isotopic measurements of the moon, they've found that it's nearly identical in composition to the Earth, not some other object.
A problem that I've been advertising is an isotopic crisis.
Jay Milosh studies planetary impacts at Purdue University. Now, he says, a new theory in the journal Nature Geoscience may at least point to a way out of that isotopic crisis of the moon's chemical isotopes so closely resembling Earth's. Here's the idea. The authors, a team of Japanese scientists, write that maybe in those early days of the solar system, the Earth was sloshing with oceans of magma. Then, when the Mars-sized object slammed into those molten seas, their models predict a lot more Earth-derived material gets ejected into orbit in the form of scorching vapors.
Temperatures of tens of thousands of degrees. And so that expands at speeds that exceed the escape velocity of the Earth. And in that way, it injects material into orbit around the Earth.
That material rapidly coalesces, and bingo, you've got a moon. Milosh says there are still a few kinks to work out in the scenario. Still, he says, it's a step forward.
Think of it as a major clue in a murder mystery or something like that. It could be a true clue toward the answer. It could be a deception. We don't know yet.
So it could be that when astronauts started walking on the moon a half-century ago, they were really leaving footprints on the remains of the primordial Earth.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
In the U.S., about 15% of people who have HIV don't know they have it. If you have it, the sooner you get diagnosed, the sooner you can start life-saving treatment. Everyone should get tested at least once, and those at high risk should get tested at least once a year. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, get tested as soon as possible. Healthcare providers, conduct routine testing according to CDC's guidelines. Screen all youth and adults for HIV risk behaviors. Help patients understand their risk and the best prevention options. If people test positive, link them to treatment and prevention counseling quickly. HIV testing is important. Know your HIV status. See your healthcare provider to get tested or find a testing site at gettested.cdc.gov. You can also get a home testing kit online or from a drugstore. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Pools, water parks, and other recreational water venues are popular places to relax and stay cool, but they can be sources of serious illness. Since 2000, nearly 500 outbreaks have been reported at recreational water venues in the U.S., resulting in over 27,000 illnesses and 8 deaths. Most were caused by parasites, bacteria, viruses, or certain chemicals in the water. Parents with young children who have diarrhea should not allow their children to swim or play in the water. In addition, bathers should check the inspection scores of pools and water parks and can conduct mini inspections using test strips before getting in the water. A few simple precautions can allow you to share the fun, not the germs. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Quote, on April 2nd, the Federal Department of Justice issued a horrifying report on Alabama's prisons that contained graphic accounts of prisoners being tortured, burned, raped, sodomized, stabbed, and murdered in unsupervised dormitories. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The just quoted New York Times article went on to report that Alabama prisons are lousy with corruption, rife with drugs and sharp knives. They are crammed full of inmates, holding 2 to 3 times their maximum capacity. And the prisons are way understaffed. Officers often stand behind a barricaded, secure area and tell inmates who have fled to them looking for safety to go get a knife. Torture in Alabama prisons is not legal or constitutional, but it is and has been facilitated, condoned, sanctioned, and accepted. These conditions continue because people on the outside generally pay little or no attention, proving the maxim that prison walls are meant as much to keep the public and the press out as they are to keep the prisoners in. Here's an update. The Department of Justice has threatened to sue the state of Alabama and its prison system. And since the report was issued in early April, 3 correctional officers in that state have been attacked, and at least 1 prisoner has been stabbed. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. This was the day that began events in Chicago that would make May 1st the most important day on the calendar for the labor movement across the world. The sun shone brightly in Chicago that day. 90,000 workers took to the streets to protest for the 8-hour day. Nearly half of them were on strike, and the rest were marching in support of the demands of working people. Many of the marches had a festive air, with music playing and banners waving. Across the country, estimates of as many as 500,000 workers participated in the walkout. Labor was on the march. But then, just 3 days later, striking workers were gunned down by police at Chicago's McCormick Reaper plant. The next night, police marched on a workers' rally that was about to wrap up at Haymarket Square. An unknown person threw a bomb into the police ranks, and the police responded by shooting wildly, striking protesters and their own men. The police cracked down against union leaders and suspected radicals was fierce. 8 men were rounded up and blamed for the crime. Despite a lack of any evidence tying them to the bombing, 4 of the accused were hung. The Haymarket martyrs became international heroes of the labor movement. On May 1st, 1890, labor leaders across Europe and the United States declared May Day the workers' holiday. In cities across the world, tens of thousands marched for the 8-hour day. Now, more than 125 years after the fateful week in Chicago, May Day remains International Labor Day. Today, a monument stands at the site of Haymarket, and each year, labor leaders from across the world travel to Chicago to visit and commemorate the site. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Another day, another shooting in America. This time it was at the University of North Carolina's Charlotte campus on Tuesday, where a man is in custody after killing 2 people and seriously injuring 4 others.
If it were up to me, I'd take away the guns.
Big breaking news Tuesday evening with both the Washington Post and New York Times reporting that Robert Muller wrote a letter to Attorney General William Barr taking exception to Barr's summary of the special counsel's report on the Russia investigation, saying it, quote, did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of this office's work and conclusions. The letter was sent on March 27th, 3 days after Barr issued his 4-page summary. It also cited, quote, public confusion about critical aspects of the results of our investigation. This threatens to undermine a central purpose for which the department appointed the special counsel, to assure full public confidence in the outcome of the investigations. The New York Times' Michael Schmidt explains what they found.
There was widespread sort of frustration and disbelief at the way Barr
characterize their findings. And I think folks in the special counsel's office understood the severity of the way Barr was doing this and the way that it was casting the die on their findings, in the way that the public's consumption of this would be so important, and that they really wanted for their work to be looked at, and instead Barr had simply just put out the findings and not given the full picture. And there was deep frustration with this, to the point that Bob Mueller, who's really someone by the book, took the unusual step to send this letter to the Attorney General. And Bob Mueller has known the Attorney General for a long time, so it's not like he just called him up and said, hey, I don't get this, I don't understand this. He memorialized it in a letter, setting off this subsequent conversation in which he sort of pushed Barr to put more information out, because at the time there was just Barr's letter, and the president had seized on it. That's the thing you have to understand. The president was saying that all of this exonerated him. And if you were in Mueller's shop and you looked at the president doing that, I could understand why that would bother you, because that's not really what they found.
The timing on this story is important, as the Attorney General is back before the Senate Judiciary Committee Wednesday morning to testify about the Mueller report. It'll be interesting to hear the senators call Barr out on his previous testimony a full 2 weeks after he received Mueller's letter, in which he blatantly lied. This question was asked by Florida Congressman Charlie Crist.
Reports have emerged recently, General, that members of the special counsel's team are frustrated at some level with the limited information included in your March 24th letter, that it does not adequately or accurately necessarily portray the report's findings. Do you know what they're referencing with that?
No, I don't. I suspect that they probably wanted, more put out.
And this one was asked the following day by Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Did Bob Mueller support your conclusion?
I don't know whether Bob Mueller supported my conclusion.
Calls for Barr's resignation or impeachment have already begun. The Guardian is reporting that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro claimed his troops have foiled an attempt by the country's, quote, coup-mongering far right to usurp his administration, and blamed Donald Trump for backing his adversaries. During an hour-long national address Tuesday night following opposition leader Juan Guaido's renewed efforts to oust him, Maduro said, quote, I truly believe that the United States of America has never had a government as deranged as this one. Maduro also called Guaido and his followers America's, quote, useful idiots. The first ever House hearing on Medicare for All happened Tuesday. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal introduced the legislation in the House.
It was a historic moment where, for the first time ever in the history of Congress, we had a real debate and discussion on my Medicare for All bill, and it has 109 co-sponsors, and the witnesses were phenomenal. And I just want to give a particular shout out to Adi Barkan, who has been a brilliant activist, has been diagnosed with ALS, and made a trip that was seriously threatening to his own life in order to come and testify and really give the crucial moral question, put that question at the forefront, which is life and death issues of healthcare. Why can't we be a country that provides universal healthcare?
Testifying with the use of a computer because he no longer has the ability to speak, this is how Adi Barkan wrapped it up.
Nurses, doctors, patients, caregivers, family members, we are all insisting that there is a better way to structure our society, a better way to care for one another, a better way to use our precious time together. For my son Carl, for your children, and for our children's children, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to win what we really deserve. No more half measures. No more health care for some. We can win Medicare for all. This is our Congress. This is our democracy. And this is our future for the making.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. Flanked by several dozen soldiers at an airbase in the Venezuelan capital of Caracas in the pre-dawn hours Tuesday, Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido declared that a revolution dubbed Operation Liberty had begun to remove President Nicolas Maduro from power. Guaido didn't use the word coup, but as scattered fighting broke out near the airbase and across Caracas, it sure felt like a coup, or at least a failed coup. By midday, Guaido's bid to convince Venezuela's army to abandon Maduro appeared to have been mostly ignored. It's just the latest instance this year of Guaido failing to translate broad political support into enough military defections to end the Maduro regime. Benjamin Friedman is the policy director at the group Defense Priorities, which advocates a more restrained use of American power overseas.
I mean, at the moment, it seems like kind of a desperate thing to do, given that there was already a lot of indication that he didn't have support of the military that he'd been counting on, and so it's unclear what triggered this move today.
Guaido's desperation may have stemmed from what one prominent Venezuelan journalist said was the opposition leader's impending arrest, which pushed Guaido to implement a coup plan that was still in its infancy. Regardless, Friedman says Tuesday's events are a setback for the Trump administration, which spent months bolstering Guaido's anti-Maduro crusade. But he's not sure that means a change in U.S. policy is imminent.
I think maybe down the road there's going to be a reevaluation in months of maybe some acceptance that we have to accommodate ourselves to Maduro's survival. But given the move to suspend oil sales and the rhetoric that's come from Bolton and others, I think it seems like they're dug in enough to the anti-Maduro effort that they will continue it even without an obvious alternative.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Still an active freeze warning in other areas that are nearby, frost warnings that are even closer. We got down to about 39 last night, so we're really close, and I didn't cover things up, but they seem to be okay. Sunny conditions currently, and that should continue throughout the day, though some wispy clouds did come in late yesterday and blocked out some of the sun and made it a little cool. But we are expecting to have highs in the low to mid 70s. Winds are negligible right now out of the south-southeast at 1 to 2 miles per hour. We'll pick up out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles in just about an hour and a half, continuing through the night and then shifting out of due north at 5 to 10 miles per hour tomorrow. Overnight lows in the mid-40s, highs tomorrow in the mid-70s, and should be that way for another couple of days, though we are inching up into the low 80s. But we should be bouncing really between the mid-70s and the low 80s in the next few days. Grass pollen remains high. The air quality index locally here is 29 parts per million in the good range, and that daytime UV index remains high at 7. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.87 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 60%, so a little dry. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 64 and partly cloudy. Paris is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. Just had a refresh. Rome is 65 degrees with rain, and they do have a flood watch because that's how it works in Rome. Kiev is 52 with fog. Kabul is 63 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 75 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 65 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and fair. And New York, New York is 56 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Alex Henderson of Alternet brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Rashida Tlaib of Michigan received an apology from the Fontana, California Police Department after being insulted in an unauthorized tweet posted on April 23rd. U.S. Today is reporting that according to the Fontana Police Department, the April 23rd tweet, which has since been deleted, but you know everything exists in the internet, always and forever, was posted by an off-duty employee who had gained access to the Twitter account of the department at Fontana PD. The employee's post read, "Nice knowing you. I became bulimic because I vomit every time I hear your BS. You are one of the most un-American persons I know. You're a disgrace to the office you hold." Well, that tweet then linked to a post on a right-wing website, explainlife.com, that discussed Tlaib's criticisms of ICE. And Tlaib, a Muslim who considers ICE anti-immigrant, has voiced her support for the hashtag Abolish ICE movement. Well, not only that, they are anti-immigrant. It's not considered. They are. After the April 23rd tweet attacking Tlaib was removed, the Fontana Police Department tweeted, "If anyone saw the inappropriate tweet that went out earlier, apparently someone gained access to our account. We apologize and we are working on fixing the issue." That employee's access to the Fontana Police Department's Twitter account was revoked, and in an official statement, the Fontana Police Department called the tweet an embarrassment and told the Bulletin this careless act does not reflect the values of the men and women that honorably serve our community.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anonymous worker bees of the Agence France Presse bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Maria Butina, the Russian arrested and convicted in the 3-year investigation of Moscow's interference in U.S. politics, called her conviction absurd and a disgrace for American justice. The 30-year-old gun activist, I think she's a spy, spoke to Russian reporters by phone after she was sentenced to 18 months in prison on Friday. "I did not expect such a severe punishment. This is absolutely absurd. This is a huge disgrace for the U.S. justice system." Butina's lawyer, Robert Driscoll, confirmed Butina's participation in the news conference. She had admitted one count of conspiracy to act as an agent of a foreign government without registering, a so-called espionage light charge the U.S. has issued before against alleged Russian spies. Her activities brought her into contact with top Republicans, including Trump, at a rally in 2015. Butina said that while in prison, she would work and read classic literature, including Dostoevsky. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And, of course, Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme aux langues de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.